Hi, everyone. Welcome to US Taiwan High-Tech Forum, where we will be starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 8:30 a.m. Taipei time, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. Please wait for a couple minutes. We'll start very soon. All right, I already see some people dial in. So while we are waiting, uh, please leave us a message in the chat box to let us know where you are dialing from. We would like to know where you are dialing from. The chat box is at the bottom right corner of your screen in our event sessions today. If you have any question to the speakers, or if you want to share your LinkedIn profile, feel free to use the chat box at the bottom right corner. So right now, we're really curious about where you are dialing from. Please leave a message in the chat box and let us know where you are joining from. Wow, I saw people dialing from you. And also I see people dialing from Taiwan, currently in Seattle. And also people from San Jose and also Kaohsiung. Wow. We have a lot of people dialing right now. We also have people from Palo Alto, Tainan, Boston. We have a lot of people from San Jose, wow, and Taipei. And people from Cupertino. Santa Clara, Fremont, Vancouver, wow. So for people who are joining right now, let me repeat again. So we're going to start our event in 1 and 2 minutes. And during the process, if you are familiar with the WebEx chat box function, feel free to type in where you are dialing from, and also let us know like who you are by joining from. Well, we have people from Hsinchu. All right. Now it's 4:30 right now. Welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you today. Now is the time for us to start our forum right now. Good evening and good morning, everyone. My name is Jane Liu. I'm one of NATIA's board members and now a second-year MBA student at Berkeley has. I have 6 years working experience in tech, and I'm a network leader of Lin Taipei, an organization aiming to empower women in the workplace. It is my pleasure to be the moderator of today's event. Hosting the US Taiwan High-Tech Forum is not an easy task. During the process, NATIA has received a lot of support from our sponsors. Wu Zhenzhong, the Minister of Science and Technology of Taiwan, is one of our sponsors. In the very beginning of our forum, let's look at a message from him together.
Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen in US and Taiwan. On behalf of the Ministry of Science and Technology Taiwan, it's my pleasure to join you today at the US Taiwan High-Tech Forum. First, I would like to commend NATIA in Silicon Valley for hosting the important event. Due to NATIA's long-term dedication, US Taiwan High-Tech Forum has become one of the most vital platforms to connect tech communities between Taiwan and the United States, especially in Silicon Valley. Taiwan and Silicon Valley had very close cooperation on technology, mostly in hardware. Taiwan firms form an integral part of US technology supply chains, and our technology cooperation has been a major force in promoting the US-Taiwan economy together for years. As we move on into the digital age, the nature of our technology cooperation will fundamentally change. Today's forum topic is very meaningful. It is by strengthening connections that we can bring the relationship in tech industries between Taiwan and Silicon Valley into the digital age. In recent years, people are facing a dramatic change from digital transformation, which not only creates a big impact to economy, but also strikes life behavior and governance. In Taiwan, to overcome the challenges and to embrace the opportunities from digital transformation, recently we focused on enhancing Taiwan's internet infrastructures, developing beyond 5G satellite communications, and most importantly, establishing cybersecurity ability. We also pay particular attention to innovative research on advanced semiconductors and quantum technologies. Digital transformation in key industry sectors such as machinery, healthcare, energy, agriculture, etc., are also undergoing through the 5+2 industrial innovation projects launched by President Tsai Ing-wen 5 years ago. To the end of my words, I'm confident with the long-term and the solid partnership between Taiwan and the Silicon Valley, we together can contribute.
Wow, what a warm and encouraging message. Thank you, Minister Wu. And we also want to give special thanks to our event sponsor, Digitime. We also want to give our special thanks to sorry, let me share my screen again. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Awesome. We also want to give special thanks to our event sponsor, Digitimes. Digitimes is a daily newspaper that offers the latest information about semiconductor, consumer electronics, IT, and communications industries in both English and Mandarin Chinese. If you are interested in tech supply chain, please visit their website to find out more information. Last but not the least, we also want to give thanks to our community partners, IEEE Young Professionals, Stanford Club of Taiwan, TSIA, Taiwan Semiconductor Industry Association, and Anchor Taiwan. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's welcome Natia Silicon Valley's Vice President and the US Taiwan High-Tech Forum Conference Chair, Joseph Chen. Joseph Chen has 15 years of experience in the semiconductor industry and is well connected between the US and Taiwan. Let's welcome Joseph to give us a short introduction about Natia. Joseph, I think we cannot hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. All right. Thank you, Jan, for the warm introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to where you are. This is Joseph Chen from Natia, Silicon Valley. On behalf of our organization and the program committee, I would like to welcome you to the second day of the 2021 US Taiwan High-Tech Forum. Next page, please. Our organization has hosted this event ever since 1998, and we are fortunate to continue the endeavor of having the 24th one by virtual event despite the pandemic impact. Also, I'd like to take the chance to introduce our nonprofit, NATIA, North America Taiwanese Engineering and Science Association, which was founded in 1991 by Silicon Valley by a group of engineers and scientists led by Dr. Zhang Yu. Next page, please. We are glad that 30 years later today, the missions are carried over, and we continue to develop platforms and playgrounds for the communities to learn new trends, to expand networks for professional and personal growth. Several examples like the annual flagship events, for example, the High-Tech Forum last Friday and today, the Startup Entrepreneurial Forum earlier in September, as well as the professional workshops and seminars like the Women's Summits, Product Manager workshops. If you are interested in learning more about NATIA, please visit our website at nata.org. I believe most of you also attended our Day 1 event last Friday and enjoyed the excellent talks from the industry leaders. We appreciate your time spending with us again today and believe the program today will be another informative and enjoyable one toward the blockchain and crypto domains. With that, I'll turn the podium back to Jen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. For people who want more information about NATIA, remember to go to our website and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Joseph led our fabulous community team to host the US Taiwan High-Tech Forum this time. We wouldn't have had today's event without the support from our program coaches, Mark, Jianming, and Rex, and committee members, Julie, Tom, and Ethan. Thank you so much. In addition, we also want to thank our NATIA members, volunteers, and students who dedicated their time to support and promote this event. Iris, Jennifer, Roanne, Anya, Carrie, Oscar, Brian, Jeff, Ken, Grace. Thank you so much for your time and support. We also want to give thanks to you, all the participants today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. If you have any comment about today's event, feel free to fill in our post-event survey. Let us know your opinion. People who fill in the form may get a chance to win a book from the 3 amazing women. Annan and Carrie are both NATIA's board directors, and Laura is an associate professor at Harvard Business School. So scan the QR code right now and be ready to provide your feedback. Now it's the time for our speaker sessions. Woo! So for today, we have 3 speakers and followed by a panel discussion. Now we are going to have Edward, adjunct professor from Stanford. He's going to share with us about his perspective about blockchain technology and promising applications. Let's welcome Edward. Edward, I think we cannot hear you. Can you kindly unmute yourself? And during the process, for people who, if you have any question to the speakers, remember to use the chat box at the bottom right corner to type in your question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, okay, welcome to the event. Today, my presentation is on blockchain technologies and some promising applications. I'm not going to talk about 1 or 2 particular blockchain applications. I'm actually going back to the fundamentals and how the blockchain technologies have developed over the last about 30 years. And I start with problem setting, challenges, solutions, and at the end, I talk about future work, both in research and in development. So this is many years ago. The original problem is called Byzantine problem. So you have 4 different generals, they negotiate a timing, they want to attack their enemy. So the 4 generals send their deputy generals to a meeting and they each carry a message. Yes, they want to attack or they don't want to attack. If they fail to attack together, they might as well not to attack because they consider they will fail. So when they go out, these deputy go out, they get their message from their boss, right? So you look at the 4 deputy generals, 3 of them carry the message saying attack, and one carried the message saying, retreat, we don't want to attack. So the four deputy generals, they meet together and they convey their message faithfully. And under this very normal situation, you have 3 votes for attack, 1 for retreat. So the consensus will be, okay, let's attack. And they have decided a time to attack at 5 a.m. And they go back to their respective generals and to convey the message. And this is a very straightforward consensus model. And when we make appointment with our friends and we have like dinner engagement, we all go through this protocol. However, there are a lot of issues. Right? The first interesting issue is, well, there could be a trust issue. So you send your deputy generals to the meeting, but maybe one of them will be replaced by a spy or something. So this is called identity fraud. So on the right-hand side, this messenger or deputy general was replaced by another person on a row, and he went there to vote for retreat. This is maybe an enemy spy. So this is one issue. The second issue is consensus can have a gridlock. So in our example, we only have 4 votes, right? So once you have a person voting for another person voting for retreat, so we get this 2-to-2 deadlock. And in the real scenario, like in a Bitcoin situation, you have maybe millions of people participating. So how to reach sort of like a majority consensus? And how do you define majority? 2/3, 1/2? And what is the threshold to be safe? And that's an interesting problem to be addressed. And then suppose everything was okay, so we went back to the beginning, the decision was made to attack at 5 a.m. But then during the return path, the message occurs some errors. So this one example was on the right-hand side, this deputy went back and the message was actually changed from attack to retreat. Or he misheard about the message. And this is often happen in a war situation. This is in a World War I or World War II, and military using pigeon to send their messages. Of course, the pigeon can be intercepted and the message can be read and message could be replaced. So Morse code was developed to remedy this problem. And today we have a lot of crypto protocols to address the issue. And the message could also be lost or maybe delivered too slowly. And this picture shows maybe one of the agent was kind of killed on the road, or the other agent traveled very, very slowly back to his camp. And this could also delay the consensus to be made in time to attack. So pretty much the Byzantine problem addresses all the issues. And those are all the issues pretty much we will encounter in today's consensus situation. So to summarize, those are old problems and the solutions are already abound. In other words, there's really not much new in the current blockchain technology. The only thing, if I want to say, is slightly different is decentralization. And you can imagine even 10 years ago, we did not have too many PCs or so many cell phones, so we don't have so many computer nodes. And now we have billions and billions of computer nodes. So in virtual, we are already in a decentralized system. And in the decentralized system, the one major factor which we care for is we don't want to have this kind of network partition, right? So what do you mean network partitions? For the novel audience, basically, if another person's cell phone fails, it wouldn't affect my cell phone, right? You don't want to say, well, my boyfriend's cell phone failed, then other people just cannot dial. That just should not happen. So this is called fault tolerance for the network partitioning. So this is perhaps the only issue like Bitcoin need to address novelly in the last few years. The other problems like trust, right? Authentication using password. And if you have this data encryption, we talk about Morse code, you have all kinds of certification methods. And the fraud attack, again, authenticate the people, you can authenticate data. And consensus, there are so many consensus protocols, and POS representing like proof of work and proof of stake. And there are BPF and PBFT, Byzantine fault tolerance protocol. Those were developed even 20 years ago. And then we have fault tolerance models and timeout recovery models. And finally, performance. So let's come back to say, okay, suppose we want to develop a blockchain application. What kind of performance we need to consider? So there are two major metrics. The first one is correctness. So correctness means you have many things happen, so you have a sequence of events. We want to ensure different views on the same sequence, they have exactly the same order, right? So, but here we could consider trade-offs, because if maintain very strong and accurate consistency takes a lot of CPU and costs a lot of money, then maybe we want to trade off saying maybe a weak consistency can be accepted, and that's really depending on the stake or on the loss situation. And we also like to reduce the number of messages sent. In a couple of slides, I will show you that cost is really, really fatal. Suppose you have only n people you need to kind of sending messages and to do consensus. And if it's a centralized system, you only need to send k times n messages. So traditionally, you have these two-phase commit protocol or three-phase. So consensus need to probably take 2 or 3 rounds to eventually matching the consensus. But if you have a decentralized situation, this number of messages will be n squared, and that's a huge amount of number. And safety is another matrix, because after we have committed a transaction, we don't want the transaction to be seen or to be revoked or modified. And two performance matrices. One is latency. We don't want a long delay. Suppose we use blockchain to do payment, and if the payment blockchain is as long as like the latency of Bitcoin, nobody will use it, right? You know, Bitcoin's latency is about 1 hour to reach the longest block. And throughput, surprisingly, one of my colleagues in Stanford, David Majerus, and he's very, very smart, and he's a co-founder of Stellar, so he knows things inside out. And when we talk about throughput, I talked to him about 2 years ago. We started discussing the issues. He said, no, throughput shouldn't be a matrix, which I will discuss later. A lot of people thinking about, well, no, what are you talking? It must be nonsense. Latency is key, okay? Throughput, let's put it aside. Okay, it's a matter of trade-off, right? So we look at performance and the correctness. If we want to have high correctness, then performance will suffer and maybe cost more. So how do we decide? In the distributed consensus protocol, and it happened to be very slow because we talk about the message number will be n squared. And so there are various POS protocols. And we know blockchain is the slowest because it takes a lot of work to do the proving. And the POS, proof of stake, is cheaper by Ethereum. So you make some compromises by saying, well, I don't need n to be so large, and you can save some time. And the centralized system is much simpler. There are lots of compromises made because of latency must be reduced. Basically, if you use a traditional Byzantine fault tolerance system, you have a much smaller n, right? Let's say the n is 20 or 30 because you trust all the parties. Let's say between hospital, you want to make a data sharing protocol. And you say, well, you don't need all the citizens in the country to vote for consensus. Maybe just the hospitals themselves, 10 or 20 hospitals, they can do the voting. And that will greatly reduce the number of participants. So this is a very simple picture to show the cost, right? So suppose we have this traditional consensus system centralized like a bank. And the transactions can be very fast. Our experience on ATM machine, right? It's kind of in seconds you get your results. It's kind of safer because if there's anything happens, anything wrong happens, you know who to talk to, who to call. And in a fully distributed system, because there is no centralized authority, at times you really don't know where to go to complain. But the problem is lacking trust. And for banks, we already accustomed to trust the banks. But how about social media companies? They store our data, they misuse our data, or they sell our data without our consent. So those are some major shortcomings at the current situation. So decentralized system or decentralized consensus protocol or just become a mainstream in the last few years. And the pros is trust in certain degree here because you have all the people get involved. So you consider this is a highly democratic system. As long as your protocol wouldn't be hacked, it can be trusted. And the really good thing here is transparency. Every participant can see what's going on, can actually see the data on the blockchain, which is actually good or bad. Because if you allow people to look at the data on the blockchain, there is no data privacy, right? So when we talk about data sharing your medical record on the blockchain, on like a Bitcoin, like a blockchain, it's definitely no. And shortly, I will talk about how to remedy that situation. And again, the cons will be definitely communication overhead. And these are four recently developed protocols, and perhaps they were overhyped. But if you look at their message complexity, and again denotes number of participants, the size of the jury pool, and the tender mean was pretty promising. But if you look at the complexity is n even cube, and on the right hand side, hash graph was also highly kind of commented. The cost is n squared. Okay, so next I'm going to get into the theoretical foundation of blockchain. So we talk about trade-off so far. It's like, oh, maybe I can relax this a little bit and not a little bit. It's like in the practical situation, I have some trade-off considerations, but trade-offs are not merely desirable. They are required in theory. And let me introduce this critical theorem. This was introduced by Professor Eric Brewer from UC Berkeley in year 2000. This famous theory, CAP stands for C, consistency. Already mentioned, different people viewing the order of events should be exactly the same. Availability means I want to do something on your system. The system, when it's functioning, it has to be available. And partition tolerance, as I just mentioned, you don't want your computer node to be affected by other people's computers. And in today's internet era with a lot of cell phones, for sure, we really want to make sure partition tolerance is there. So based on the three bubbles here, and the theorem saying only 2 out of 3 properties can be preserved, and that's really, really bad, right? So you cannot missing partition tolerance if you want to have a lot of users. So we can only have either a CP system, guarantee partition tolerance and consistency, or an AP system. So what is blockchain? What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin ensures partition tolerance for sure. A lot of people want to use it, and availability, right? So when we want to log into blockchain to Bitcoin to do something, you don't want to say, oh, you cannot come in or it's out of service. You want to be able to use it right away. But consistency is compromised, and Bitcoin only promises weak consistency. So in this 1 hour, when people are doing proof of work, so you have not really established the longest block, your transaction, the block your transaction was on, and in that particular 1 hour, inconsistency could happen. Okay, but that's a cost to pay. So look at the Bitcoin, and it's expensive to maintain, right? In the current situation, maintaining the whole Bitcoin blockchain takes about $1 billion US. So if you want to start a new one, even it's open source, it will be quite challenging. And as I mentioned, lack of data privacy. So therefore, like Ethereum solved the problem by addressing or introducing a smart contract. And latency is extremely long, and this we know about. And throughput here I touched upon a little bit. According to David Majerus, he said, well, throughput can simply be solved by adding computers. If your system requires other performance to be intact, the only way you can solve the throughput problem is by adding resources. There's no way around. Okay, so throughput shouldn't be your design parameter. If your business is very successful, you just throw in more computer resources. So think about it. The other one is centralized system. So let's say a bank, right? Bank, they don't have partitioning problem. If there's any partition, they just shut down the whole system. And that's very, very straightforward. Sometimes you walk to your ATM, it's in maintenance because they are running that kind of centralized system. But how about you want all three properties to be preserved at the same time. So here I'm going to use the system we developed, jointly developed with Stanford and the National Taiwan University. And people here must know about Professor Liao Shiwei, and he is one of the mind behind this protocol. So basically, we want to have all three protocols, all three properties to be preserved. And Soteria, if you look at the left-hand side, is a goddess of Greek goddess for safety. So we use the name to say we want to preserve data safety and the user data privacy. And this has been a very critical issue because we have been sharing a lot of data on the internet, including cell phone data and driving, and we have Tesla, whatever, Google Home, and also we have lots of medical IoTs. And if we don't preserve privacy, we would be in trouble. Ourselves would be transparent in the words, right? So top consumer privacy concerns, and there are a couple of very important privacy laws have been put into practice. One is GDPR in Europe, and another one is CCPA in California, and soon will be adopted by other states. And so you look at consumer concerns, they worry about identity theft, and the private data will be made public, especially medical and finance. And taxation is also an issue, right? President Trump still denies to open his tax records, and data can be sold unfairly. And finally, CCPA requires three attributes. The first one is transparent. So if you want to preserve users' privacy, the preservation whole process needs to be transparent. Let's say I want to opt into, let's say, cookies. And if I look at the ledger, I should be able to say, yes, I agree to allow the site to access my cookie, and the site acts according to it, right? So transparent, I can audit. And another thing is revocable. If I say, yes, I allow you to use my cookie, later I say no. And that transaction will be saying, no, you cannot do it anymore. And the whole process must be provable. And provable is the most challenging matter. Because if you go to a bank to say, hey, did you obey my privacy consensus, or go to Facebook, any company, they say, yes, what can you do? They cannot prove to you, you have to take their words for granted. So problem solved, no, as I said, you have to have a transparent, decentralized system. Otherwise, privacy may be just a lip service until the government audit the company, and individual couldn't even know what's going on. And indeed, the government has audited many companies, and these are here we can see a list of samples of companies get fined. And Facebook was fined for $5 billion for privacy issue. And Google lately was fined by GDPR because they kind of violate Children Privacy Act. And some companies treat this kind of penalty as cost of sales, because if they collect your data, they can make even more money, but it's unfair. So therefore, we have to deal with it. So how do we have a system with all three properties together? The solution is we want to have a hybrid, multi-tier blockchain. And this is important not only for privacy issue. When we talk about the Taiwan government would like to push for transparent government, and that kind of system, just like this security or privacy system, requires low latency, and also require all three properties I just mentioned. And the three tiers here, the first tier, top tier, is a public chain. The public chain on the top ensures the entire system can be transparent. And the second layer is the ledger. The ledger is where we store our transactions, where the order of the transactions got insured. And finally, the third layer attached to the second layer is the smart contract. So it seems to be a little bit abstract here, but let me just explain how the first and second layer together can address a performance issue at the same time, can also satisfy correctness requirements. So the first layer we can consider, maybe it's just an Ethereum, right? Latency can be quite long. But the second layer blockchain, and you can use a very fast blockchain with a small number of jury. And then once you have your blocks established, then you can hash your block onto the parent chain. You understand my point, right? You only hash the root of a Merkle tree onto the public chain. So here, the ledger, the second level, every block may have 1,000 transactions. So the point here is for 1,000 transactions, one Merkle tree, we only hash the root once and put it on the public chain. So the latency can be reduced, and also the latency the user perceives is a second layer latency. And the throughput is actually 1,000 folds, right? So it's very interesting design. Details we document in our paper. And then the smart contract is also essential. Let me get into it quickly. And this is a picture depict what's going on. On the top is a Ethereum or Bitcoin. At the bottom layer or the second layer, we have our, let's say, cheaper or weaker consensus protocol, and could be hash graph, could be Tendermint. And then we have blocks, right? Every block in the second tier blockchain, the root will be hashed to the first layer. Now, smart contract. So smart contract currently, you can consider very straightforward, right? You can write a piece of code in the contract. And when the contract was approved, reaching the consensus between the user and the provider, and the contract gets signed and validated, then the contract can be executed on a client virtual machine. So like on my computer or your computer, so it could be trusted. And even better, when we develop at Stanford, we say, no, I think if you have a contract, you need to be audited. You cannot write code in the contract because when other people want to edit or audit the contract, they cannot read the code. Most of people couldn't read code. So it's better to put natural language in the contract, right? Most of the legal documents are written in natural language. So natural language as the public contract, and the key here is we should convert this natural language into programming language. Okay? It's not extremely hard. And my team, my group, I belong to the team I belong to called OVAL, Open Virtual Assistant Laboratory. We have been doing this for a couple of years. And to do translation from one language to another could be challenging. But translating natural language to be programming code is much easier because the programming code doesn't have too many constructs, right? You typically have a get, maybe you have read or write, and you have conditions. You're thinking about SQL statements. There are just not too many combinations. Okay, so this is good news. And advantage of contract is it's just a piece of code, no data, so you don't reveal privacy. And the data is offline, and only when the smart contract get invoked by the virtual machine, then the data will be extracted, right? And you can log the transaction saying, well, the data was extracted. So the audit can say, well, yes, the consensus was made, and he or she retrieve the data. He or she may be Facebook or other agencies, or you can sell the data to another hospital. So in short, this is a very attractive protocol and can make good compromise between performance and required features. The paper is called Soteria. You can search on the internet and you can read the paper for details. And not only we specify the protocol itself, but also compare some consensus protocol candidates. And we currently consider Hashgraph to be a viable candidate, and as well as maybe Tendermint. Okay, so blockchain I consider has been overly hyped. I received some questions before I get started to deliver the keynote. Some questions talk about what applications are viable, more promising, what research should be done. So here I want to convey the opposite. When to say no to blockchain. And shortly, you can see a list of so-called promising blockchain applications enumerated or suggested by finance people. I actually oppose to some suggestions. So first of all, if you have a bunch of transactions, but there's no order enforced. So you don't care about order. So different people look at the transactions, have different orders. It doesn't matter. So don't use consensus protocol because it's not going to help you. You're just wasting your time, right? You're wasting computer resources. And append-only lock plus data certificates will suffice, right? Why use consensus protocol? You are just throwing your money into nowhere. The second one is don't think about when people ask you to say or advertise they have a better consensus protocol. If they are working on research, you say, okay, let me listen. But if really it's a novel protocol and they say it works much better than Bitcoin, don't even bother to listen too much. The reason is because a consensus protocol, if you want to deploy it, it has to be battle tested for 10 or 20 years. The reason is there are so many corner situations. You can fail, you can be attacked, message can be lost, a node can be shut down. So if you have not tested the protocol in scale, just on paper, no, it's not going to work, period, right? You don't want to put the protocol in production if the protocol may have some errors happen, and even you don't know how to debug it. And the third one is when the data entry could be easy fraud, then you are wasting your time to use blockchain. Because I heard a few projects like people raising pigs or kind of growing teas. They want to use blockchain to make sure they can prove their products or produce to be organic. However, how do you prove, right? Because you really require some people to enter the data into the system. There's no way to automatically detect whether a produce is truly organic. There's no such kind of sensor, right? If you can invent such kind of chemical sensor, that will take some years or to work. So can you trust people for them to enter data to tell you organic? Then why bother? Using a database would suffice. And also here, there's no order of events, right? I feed my pig at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. That has nothing to do with whether the food is organic or not, right? But I do hear a lot of people working on that kind of projects, and also low stake transactions. Bitcoin or blockchains, they are not cheap to maintain. If the stake, suppose you say I lost something, it's really, really inexpensive, then you don't invest that, right? So the example is you go to the supermarket and some very nice supermarket, they have buckets of coins, one penny. And so if you need to pay something like 20.01 or something, and you don't want to have a change of 99 cents, so they allow you to pick a penny and just give it to them. So and also you can contribute to the penny bowl or basket. So this is low stake, and nobody track on who stole something or overcharged on this particular bowl or bucket. But only when you have lots of penny, like a barrel of penny, then you worry about correctness and worry about your loss. Right? So cost is the issue. So folks ask me about promising blockchain applications, and I surveyed the internet. This is a list. And I think the first one makes a lot of sense, secure sharing of medical data. I know there's a huge project in Taiwan wasting billions of dollars and trying to do using a federated learning to do medical data sharing. And that was just a joke. Do you know why I say that's a joke? Federated learning is basically saying, okay, each hospital you can keep your data, and you do maybe neural network just extracting some features for about 10 layers, then throwing the data, metadata to a centralized processing unit, and then we can aggregate data together. But you know what are the problems? First of all, different hospitals, their operation process of collecting data can be different, and the machine resolution could be different. The image resolution could be different. Their original neural network algorithm can have different layers, different parameters, they tune differently. So when you aggregate their parameters together, those are just garbage, okay? So Andrew Ng put it very, very clearly in a workshop in this April. He said, I still stand by all my publications on medical images, but I tell you the truth, when classifier I train really well with very high performance, they say 80%. If I take that classifier down to another hospital down the street, it just doesn't work. It's just falling apart. It's a joke. So go back to review. His interview happened in April this year. So rest of the application you can take a look. But based on the criteria I just mentioned, some of them are just right away. I would say I'm not interested, right? So you say, oh, you want to safeguarding music royalty or original content. I really don't see order there, right? So let's say privacy. I say I opt into certain things, then I opt out. So you can say, well, there's a revocation happening. But musical royalty, copyrights, once you have copyrights, I don't see any people going to revoke his own copyrights. So I have no idea why blockchain need to be used in that situation. A pen-only log would suffice. Okay, think very carefully. With respect to research, that's a different thing, right? Research, please, you can research different protocols, maybe can be deployed in 20 years. And hybrid blockchain is interesting. The two layers blockchain, as I just mentioned, you can do other kind of combinations, and that's an interesting topic. And elastic blockchain is also interesting because they say you can entertain many transactions on your, say, payment system. But you say if the payment is lower than, let's say, $10, you don't even bother, right? You don't even bother to track the order. Only when the amount of transaction or the stake of transaction is higher above a threshold, and say, okay, I'm going to make sure that particular transaction, its consistency is ensured. So you could have this kind of policy, flexibly, elastically deal with different values of transactions on the fly. And for a question saying, well, what are the good entry points about blockchain research? And frankly, I look at Berkeley's research and Stanford research. I would recommend David Tsai. He is really, in principle, researching fundamental issues of blockchain technologies. So you can visit his website, and then from there you can see citations, and you can find other references. And for Taiwan specifically, we know our Mr. Tang, and when she was interviewed, she said, well, Taiwan has this transparent government. And the Solterra system is really a good implementation, can be applied to achieve this objective. And to make sure the government is transparent is really critical for democracy, right? Democracy is not just majority voting and the winner takes all. It's important to let the people understand the decision process and can make sure they know where the money was spent. So since Ms. Tang is really favor about this topic, and also she already shared the success of the experience of Taiwan, I think I'm really encouraged, and we can take this direction even further. So in conclusion, today I discuss about the basic problem of this consensus protocol, and we talk about challenges. Those are age-old challenges, nothing really new except for decentralization. We need to deal with this large N, and when N is large, and the number of messages can be N squared, and latency could suffer. Okay, and solutions pretty much are all solutions just bottle in a new can. And future work, I talked about it already. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge my partners, especially Professor Liao Shiwei in National Taiwan University, and Professor Monica Lam at Stanford University, and David Majors, and he's a co-founder and chief scientist of Stella, which works on cross-border funding transactions. There are a lot of migrant workers in the US. They want to send the money back to Mexico or other countries, and using banks to do it is really tough because some illegal immigrants, they couldn't even open a bank account. So that company has done fantastic services. So with that, and there are references, and also I put a very long appendix with the terms, definitions, and references. and feel free to share with your colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. It's so insightful. We do have some question for you because your sharing is so inspiring. So one question that we would like to ask you is, given your previous experience at HTC and in the AR/VR sector, what's your thought about the relationship interaction between metaverse and blockchain? Is blockchain an essential element in the future metaverse digital world? And what are the most promising application of blockchain in metaverse from your perspective?
I really don't think in the VR environment, blockchain has direct relationship or blockchain is an enabled technology to VR. And VR, the hurdles are, in my opinion, one is the power, right? How do you support your power to your device for a long duration of time? The second problem is the weight of your headset. And the former CTO of Microsoft, he said about, he actually visited HTC to say, he said, if your headset is not as light as a pair of glasses, and most of people wouldn't just use it all the time, right? So it's critical to be lightweighted. And the third is the modality of human-computer interface. And you cannot throw out a keyboard in the middle of a VR situation to say, oh, enter your input. So I think voice input is really important. But if you want to record events to make sure VR events can be audited and they have the same sequences, I really cannot see that at this point. If you want to say, I want to do some monetary transactions in a VR environment, you might as well just use your Visa or credit card.
Got it. Thank you for your sharing. And I have one last question for you is for people who are not ready already in the blockchain industry, can you provide some advice on some approaches that one can get involved and learn? For example, are there any education classes or online materials for them to study and any blockchain project that would be suitable for beginners to contribute or learn from to better grasp the fundamentals of the blockchain technology?
I think my presentation deck, which I will make public, right? In the reference or appendix, I really enumerate a lot of materials, and you can take a look. And also Coursera edX from MIT, you can search for some blockchain introductory course. But my principle of research is I always consider Aristotle's first principle to be correct. You don't learn something from one application or one example. That's just not going to work. You talk to Elon Musk, you say, you always think about what are the major fundamental shortcomings and principles of a problem. You don't go to take a Bitcoin class, try to learn blockchain. And I would suggest that would be just a wrong way to go. So go deep to the fundamentals. And the first thing, maybe the only thing, is to learn consensus protocols.
Got it. Thank you so much. We do have a couple questions from the audience, but due to due to a time limit, like maybe a professor, you can share your email or your contact information to the audience. Maybe we can have some offline discussion like after this forum. Thank you so much for your thank you so much for your sharing today. It's very, very inspiring.
Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much, Jen.
So now let's move on to the next topic. Now we are going to have Andrew Tan from Draper University. Andrew Tan is the chair of the executive committee at Draper University and partner at Draper Associates and Draper Dragon, a cross-border fund between Silicon Valley and Asia. He assists with their business development, particularly in international market entry, strategy, and partnership. Andrew is also an investor. He has invested in blockchain and crypto companies such as Coinbase and Maker's Place. Today, Andrew will talk about recent recent blockchain application growth trends, new technologies, and their impact with focus on crypto finance. Let's welcome Andrew Tan.
Thank you. I think I'm having a little bit of, can you see me? Looks like you cannot, right?
No, we cannot see you.
1 second. Great. Okay, I think I know what's going on. Great.
Now we can see you.
Okay, great. Now the next is I'm going to try to share my screen. The screen looks a little squished, but I guess that'll do. All right, great. I think I'm going to just go by this.
We can see your screen now.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just going to. I think this is better. Great. This way I can talk to you as I. Okay, great. So welcome. I am very happy to be here. And today I want to share with you about innovation and blockchain, so these two topics. But let me first share with you my general thoughts about innovation. So I want to just take us sort of at a very high level. We look at innovation in the world in the most recent IT revolution since the 90s, right? We have the telecom revolution, and then media revolution, and then enterprise, entertainment, and then industrial. We have shared economy, financial services. All these things happen over time, right? Because one technology, that's the internet, right? And if you look at this one technology, how long it took for it to propagate through these different industries, and then you look at the level of regulation in each one of these industries, it became very clear the amount of time it takes for adoption in these industries is linearly correlated with the amount of regulation, right? So what's happening is if you then look at the industries that have not been transformed, these are healthcare.
Andrew, sorry for interrupt you, but we would do receive some feedback that we may need to like try to make your presentation full screen so that the audience are able to read the text on your screen. Are you able to share full screen or present it?
You cannot see the screen?
The text is a little bit small for the audience. Okay. I don't see a. Let me see. Okay. Never mind. If it is not able to have full screen, then I think we can just continue with it.
This is.
Oh, it's way more better. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically, it takes time for technologies to propagate through industries. And there are three big industries, in my opinion, that have not been fully transformed. That's healthcare, education, and government. Okay. But I do think because of COVID, these industries, the adoption would take off a lot faster, right, for various reasons. Right? Suddenly, COVID could be cured, vaccine could be found in a span of 12 months. Vaccine used to take 5 years, right? Suddenly, students could get their degree attending Zoom University without showing up. Suddenly, government can, dole out money very quickly, and workers can work cross country line without getting work visa in the blockchain environment. Right? So you don't need work visa, you work in the blockchain. So some things happened during COVID, and it increased the adoption of these various industries. So I want to share with you these three industries I have a thesis about. One is healthcare, the elixir of life. Basically, from the Egyptians, Romans to the Chinese, who always want to find this elixir of life so you can live forever, right? Chrysopia, some people call it alchemy, right? The idea of turning, lead into gold, basically creating money, right? That to me is basically the blockchain technology trying to replace currency, the fiat currency, conquering the sky, flying into Mars and whatnot. So today we'll talk about alchemy or Cryptopia, the idea of blockchain. I do want to share something funny with you. When you go to the conferences for each one of these updated stage for, anyways, I'll let the moderator look at the messages. It's like too small for me to look at. If you go to each one of these conferences, they will think the other people are crazy. So for instance, if you go to a healthcare conference, people think you can live forever, but they don't believe a world where currency could be a third party. You go to a blockchain conference, they believe, of course, third party currency or decentralized currency is the way of the future, but they don't believe you could travel to Mars. You go to a space conference, everybody believes, of course, we're going to go to Mars, live there, but humans cannot live forever, and we probably still need fiat currency. But the reality is that there has been so much progress made in each one of these industries. I think in the next 10 years, for instance, you'll see drastic improvement in each one of these. And today, let's talk about the blockchain. So the number of wallets that you have, and I did the study until 2017 or so, it has drastically improved over time. And in a way, if you track the computational power and the communication bandwidth of network speed for consumers, it's growing faster than either one of those computational power or network speed, right? So essentially, we're looking at a new type of adoption technology, right? Blockchain wallets. It's an interesting proxy for the consumer adoption of this new technology. So it's basically going viral at a lot higher, faster pace than other things we've seen. So I coined the term, this is really the internet square, right? It is spreading faster than the internet itself because the basic premise is that when we are communicating, humans are communicating, talking is one way of communicating. Downloading web pages is one way of communicating. But transacting, going through, wallets and exchanging money or goods in the electronic wallet, that is something that would take off. It has been taking off a lot faster than other applications before. I want to share with you our investment landscape for the blockchain industry. Generally, we look at a few key sectors. We look at the DeFi sector, we look at the NFT sector, and we look at the layer 2 infrastructure, and we look at the sort of the picks and shovels. So I can talk about each one of these very briefly. So the picks and shovel is an industry we as a fund have been investing since 2015. That fits very well into our IT portfolio. These are exchanges such as Coinbase, and then the DeFi is something, an NFT is something that kind of started taking off around 2017. We started investing in companies like Maker's Place, and in layer 1 and layer 2, some of the infrastructure play, we started investing around 2017 as well. And then the most interesting one, I think, is sort of popped up in the last 12 months. It's the idea of metaverse. And I know in the previous session, we discussed briefly about metaverse. I think it's interesting because it is truly an intersection between technology, government.
Sorry, Andrew, for interrupting you again, but we received some feedback from the audience say that they cannot hear you clearly. Would you mind to sit closer to your mic so that they can hear you better?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to end the talk very quick now, so we can go into Q&A. So metaverse is basically the next stage where people can work and live. It's an extension of Second Life. I think it's quite interesting that the last go around Second Life didn't quite work, but for now, if you have a job um, in the blockchain space, then you could actually make this kind of a must attend. You can live in Second Life, live in the metaverse. You got a job to do, and you have a job you can consume, which then completes a loop and creates adoption. So with that, I wanted to share with you some of our investment portfolio. So it ranges, like I said, from picks and shovel plays like Coinbase, Ledger of the world, to layer 1 network such as Tezos, VeChain, Quark, IOTX. And then I'll end the talk with just some of the unicorns that I have seeded. 2021, I've started doing this in 2020. So last 20 years, I have seeded 10 unicorn companies, all from sort of scratch, a single entrepreneur and a piece of paper. So with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew, for your insightful sharing. And we do have some questions for you. The first question we have for you is, do you have any suggestion for young people who want to work for blockchain startups or crypto startups? What's the important criteria to select a company that they should invest their time and money in?
Yeah, so if you are looking for a startup to work, this is a great time because people cannot hire enough engineers. My suggestion is to spend time reading the white paper, figuring out if you'll be a customer first. If you are willing to be a customer, then you should then just email the projects and invest your time. In my opinion, your time is the most valuable commodity in your life. So if you're willing to be a customer, then that is the minimum requirement to join a company.
Awesome. Wow, it's a very good suggestion. Time is so precious for young people. So another question we are also curious about is like, can you compare and contrast the centralized versus decentralized model in the blockchain industry? For example, Coinbase now it seems like having a centralized exchange, while Uniswap is a decentralized exchange. Which model do you think will prevail in the future, or will both models coexist? Can you elaborate more on this tussle of a centralized versus decentralized blockchain technology?
Yeah, blockchain technology by definition should be decentralized. So it's actually very ironic. The largest exchanges are centralized, but I think it's a necessary transition for society, both the retail customers as well as the regulators, that they feel comfortable with a centralized party to hold our asset and to check the tax records. But I do think eventually things need to be decentralized because that clearly is the way that the consumers prefer for utmost amount of um, uh, privacy, control, and incentives, right? Because you could imagine the amount of money these centralized exchanges make, why not divide that profit and give it to all the customers? So I do think eventually that's the most efficient way to divide value and disintermediate the middleman, which has been the movement for finance for the last decade. And I think blockchain being the new technology, clearly it should not be, at the end of the day, it should not be centralized. But the question is, we need to figure out how to make the retail customers comfortable giving asset to, this decentralized ecosystem, and then how do we get the regulator to feel comfortable that they could collect taxes and they could fight against, AML and require KYC. So there's some work to be done.
Awesome. Thank you for your advice and suggestion. And we all have some questions from the audience. The first question we have is, what are your thoughts on the innovation landscape in the blockchain and related industries in Taiwan?
Could you repeat? Innovation.
What are your thoughts on the innovation landscape in blockchain and related industries in Taiwan? What's Taiwan's current blockchain industry look like from your perspective?
Oh, I think it's great. I actually think Taiwan has some great companies like XREX, very well, great founders. They work with NDF, and my understanding is that they actually work very closely with regulators, so everything is done correctly. But at the same time, it's also very efficient and nimble. They're able to attract talent from worldwide to help create this new type of exchange. And I think it really is a great example of how startup companies working with the regulators hand in hand to promote innovation for the country and provide leadership for the world.
Awesome. So from your perspective, what are some ways you think Taiwan can participate in the global blockchain ecosystem? What's our key strengths that you think we can utilize?
I think Taiwan is going to play a huge role in blockchain because if you notice, blockchain is a industry that levels a playing field across the countries, regardless the size of the country and the wealth of the country. It is all dependent upon talent, because if you look at a lot of these big projects, if you look at the team members' background, it's almost like a United Nation. You have founder from, Brazil, chief engineer based in Poland, and then their community manager is in the US. So you have all these, the best of breed. People don't really care about where you're from, which time zone you're located, where you went to school, right? There's a new community, digital community, the blockchain, that is built above the land-based government. Right? So the government have, this is Taiwan and this is Korea and that's US. So we have these borders that makes us all separated. But I think in the blockchain world, suddenly people don't really think about what kind of passport you hold, right? I think people are more concerned, are you a Solana fan or are you a Polkadot fan? Which layer one do you believe in, right? And that is the identity of allegiance, right? That's the commonality. And we actually saw this happen in the mobile world, right? A 13-year-old boy has more common, a 13-year-old boy in Brazil has more commonality with a 13-year-old boy in Korea than then from their own countrymen at a different age, from say a 20-year-old, right? So your nationality is less of a difference. It's more about age. And then in fact, there's probably a bigger difference if you're on an Android operating system or Apple iOS, right? So it's not about which country you're from. It really is about which technology allegiance you have. Right? So I think Taiwan has a huge advantage because it is a highly educated workforce, right? Highly technical, and then a very reasonable cost of living, a extremely well protected and well understood law that protects intellectual property. And lastly, I think, as I mentioned in the last example of XREX working with NDF, their ability to be nimble and be reasonable about regulation that allows innovation, right? There are other types of government that will say, hey, you cannot do this, right? That kills innovation. And then there's also the other type of government that comes in and gives very clear guidelines that makes it kind of choking. And then you have I think the Taiwan approach is more like a sandbox. Let's just let things work and see what happens be very thoughtful before you write down regulation, but generally promote entrepreneurship. And generally, when governments do that, I think that you have the best chance of of um, uh, of of uh, of creating a new industry. Because a lot of times we don't know, even entrepreneurs, we don't know what is the best regulation. Nobody knows. We have to try it before we figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for your insight. I think yeah, Taiwan do. I think the government right now is on the right track. We do give like people a lot of room to develop blockchain related startup and project. So I'm also quite curious from your perspective if for young people who are interested in blockchain industry and in crypto, how would you? What's your advice to them? How should they start? Is there any do's and don'ts?
No, I tell you, I've heard so many examples. One of our portfolio companies just started working with Uniswap. I said, how did you get to know them? I said, oh, I just emailed them. I just, it's as simple as that because it is a blockchain community. It's a very inclusive and open community, right? Granted, when these projects get big, they won't respond to your email, but especially if you're part of the community, there is very little sense of class, right? Everyone is equal. Everyone has the same voice. So my suggestion is literally just message the community manager, message the engineering team if you want to work on. You will be very surprised. You will be very surprised. This is a group of probably the most open-minded people I've ever met in my career.
Awesome. Thank you for your advice. And we also have another question from the audience. It's about your investment decisions. So what ultimately decides yes or no in your investment decisions? Of your investments, what separated the ones which become unicorns?
Yeah, I think so there are two questions in what you just asked. One is
Yeah, yeah.
how do we decide yes or no? And based on the experience, what are the characteristics of a unicorn company?
Yeah, exactly.
So the key characteristics of unicorn companies, it's typically companies that go after a large market, very large market, and a company that has a team that lasts for typically 10 years, right? Very patient, very patient team, large market, patient team. And the founders, notice plural, typically there are two people or more. The founders are typically uh, already either expert, I should say always passionate about what they're working on, but oftentimes the expert in the space. And oftentimes out of the two people, there is one technical person. So those are the characteristics, and that's exactly how we look for investment candidates, yes or no. I look for a big market. I look for people I think can do a job for 10 years. I look for people I think can stay together for a long time and without fighting and splitting. And part of my job is to interview people and try to figure out what happens and that's my job. So I interview at least 5 to 6 people a day, 5 days a week, and we go through 2 to 3 thousand business plans a year. Typically invest in maybe 20 to 30.
Got it. And previously, you also mentioned that you have been there are a lot of industry that you mentioned a lot of industry. So we also have one question from the audience that is quite curious about what collaboration is needed between the industries that you mentioned, and like how should those industry collaborated with blockchain technologies?
So I will try to sort of clarify the question, see if I did it correctly. Let's say there's a blockchain technology you want to use for, say, the automotive industry for logistics and part tracking. Right? So you need a collaboration between the car industry and the blockchain company, right? So how do you promote the collaboration?
Yeah, I think it's about like how individual industries collaborate with the blockchain technologies.
Yeah,
How
okay.
do they like create like innovation together?
Yeah, so I will share with you. I don't know if you remember seeing a slide that says, keep virtual, keep digital. We do think the first group of adoptions are going to be the digital companies that doesn't require collaboration with offline business, right? If you think about it, the fastest way to adopt is you're not dependent upon a partner, right? So that's why DeFi took off. That's why NFT took off, right? Because they could do everything on their own. But I do think some of these technology will start working with offline companies. And in fact, we have a company called VeChain. They have been working with a lot of offline companies and been doing this for a long time, 4 years now. Lots of traction with BMW, NBL, Deloitte, H&M. So there's a lot of offline interaction. I think the accomplishment they have made is there's a lot of business development because you have to convince the corporate partners to work with you. And my opinion, my experience has been the most difficult part about working with these big companies. I call it dancing with the elephants. To work with BMW, Louis Vuitton, H&M, it's not easy because they're so big. I have two advice. One is start with something small, right? Don't want to start with a master service agreement. That would take you 2 years to negotiate, and by then the startup is dead. So you want to start with something very small, very simple, and then figure out who your counterparty is. In those organizations, there is an engineer, there's a manager, there's a director, there's a VP of engineering, there's CTO, there's CFO, and then the CEO, and the board has to sign. There's a chairman. Oh my God! And by the time you figure out everyone's stamp, the startup already died 3 times. So find a small project, figure out who could sign, then work with that person, get it done, prove yourself, and now you're on the approved vendor list, right? Then you increase the scope of the project. That's my recommendation.
Awesome. I also have a personal question that I would like to ask you. So previously, I saw that you have a lot of experience in blockchain and also crypto. So I'm quite curious about your perspective of crypto. What brought you to crypto field? Because there was a lot of argument and also a lot of debates about crypto before. So what's your view about crypto in the beginning, and what did you change your mind over time?
No, I think initially it was more of just curious. I think my wife worked with a woman, and husband is a big crypto fool. He actually seeded Coinbase, so he said, "Hey, you should try some," and I just tried it. Uh, Initially, it's just a small investment just to see what it is. But once you have money and then you start looking, you start learning, And then I think that's when I realized over the last, I first got it in 2013, so 8 years ago. I've been through 3 cycles. Basically, every cycle you go through, your belief becomes stronger that the cycle comes back, right? So, you know, I think now I am so convinced that this is not going away. Um, I could cite legal reasons why it will not go away because in the US, the largest democracy on earth in terms of market capitalization, the government basically already says Bitcoin and Ethereum are commodities, right? So it's legal commodity. It's no different from orange, corn, or pork belly. You cannot ban it. So these 2 things are not going away. If they're not going away, there'll always be a market for it. Second thing is OCC already approved US banks to allow stablecoin to use the US dollar railings. So basically what that means is that US banks are by law allowing stablecoin to be settled. So there is a official and legal railing for Bitcoin and any crypto to turn into, stablecoin, and then that goes into US dollars. So that's why I think, this year, 2021, is a major year because of these 2 rulings. This is an asset that's not going to disappear for as long as people want it, right? There's always a fear that regulators could kill this industry. But I would say with confidence in 2021, this industry is not going to get killed by the US regulators. So if it could survive in the US, the largest democracy in terms of market cap on earth, then this asset class is not going to die. Basically, any citizen would be able to take their Bitcoin, bring it to the US, bring it onto the US dollar banking system. And that is a huge milestone for this asset class to achieve, because last year I couldn't say that. The year before I couldn't say it. 5 years ago, I thought, Bitcoin could be a security, right? So there's a lot of uncertainties, but this year I think every cycle I'm more confident this is going to be a industry that is for sure going to be okay by the regulators.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your sharing, Andrew. It's our pleasure to have you today. Now we gotta
Absolutely.
move on to the next session, but thank you for your
Thank you.
time and your sharing. Thank you. Okay. All right, so let's move on to our next speaker. Next, we have Clara Tao. She is the founding officer and director of Filecoin Foundation. Filecoin is a leading project in cryptocurrency, and Clara also has years of experience working for the US government on countering foreign influence, election security, and homegrown extremism. Clara will give us insight about introduction to Web3 and emerging trends in global blockchain policy. Let's welcome Clara Tao. Clara, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, let me go ahead and share it. Give me 1 second to present. 1 second here. Sorry, my slides just. All right, I may have to do this. There we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen right now.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for having me today. This is such an honor to speak to all of you guys. I know you guys just had a really exciting overview from Andrew, and I wanted to kind of deep dive because many of you guys know the decentralized finance space, I think, relatively well. I did want to cover a little bit about what Web3 is. This might be a term that many of you guys may have heard. And then second, I would love to cover a little bit more about emerging policy trends. Sorry, I don't know what just happened here. Great. So we will leave around 10 minutes at the end for question and answer. And then if folks have questions in the meantime, please do add it in the chat or definitely let our moderator, Jane, know. Okay, next. So, so first off, I wanted to start off with a story. As many of you guys remember, around almost a month ago, Facebook experienced an outage. And for 5 hours, the 3.5 billion people that depend on Facebook every day, they had no access to it. This includes all the businesses that rely on Facebook. This includes other companies under Facebook, now called Meta, such as WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram, and actually even Facebook employees were locked out of using their own service. I had friends who worked at Facebook who took the day off, not being able to check any of their email. And it's kind of funny that today when we think about the web, thinking about Facebook employees not being able to unlock the own doors that they've created, right? And it's also a stark reminder of how much of our lives are spent on the web that is such a fragile ecosystem owned by so many single points of failure, right? So a lot of people today with businesses on Facebook, they have no other option. They have marketplaces, they have games, they have e-commerce sites, they have they have videos that support their living wage. And so what's even more contrasting to this is the very next day after this outage, if all of you guys remember, there was a Facebook whistleblower that testified in US Congress and to say and to share just how much data that Facebook has collected, how much abuse Facebook has used for user data to monetize. This is all parts of Facebook's business model. And the real problem today is that today's internet is centralized. In fact, the majority of the web that we experience, it rests on really 3 central data warehouses owned by Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and also Google Cloud. And we've seen many of these companies actually suffer blackouts where entire businesses are actually taken down. And this has huge implications for our entire economy. And so we believe at the Filecoin Foundation that we can build a better version of the internet, starting with a decentralized internet where websites will stay up even if some nodes fail critically, and that this information is available and dependent on not just one server or one company, but a decentralized network of people upkeeping it. And this ultimately provides a core ability for us to store humanity's most important information. That might be information you need for work, that might be critical information that might be used in human rights courts, right, where people's lives are dependent on it. And Filecoin actually provides the incentive for people to contribute storage towards this decentralized internet. And so here at the Filecoin Foundation, we are trying to build the internet of everyone. This year alone, we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary since testnet launch. We have 3,300 storage providers all around the world and the ability to host 12 exabytes of storage capacity. And to put that into perspective, that means we can store all the written works of mankind in all languages from the beginning of recorded history to today, more than 10 times over. And so that is really why we are a Web3 company. We are really building the building blocks of what makes up the next version of the web, starting with file storage. You can imagine applications, everything else rests on top of this layer of how things are stored. And so today, the Filecoin Foundation, we are the stewards of the Filecoin community. In 2017, the creators of Filecoin envisioned that an independent foundation would serve as the long-term governance for the Filecoin ecosystem. And so our mission is to grow an open ecosystem for decentralized storage and to give developers an open and sustainable platform to build, enhance, and monetize on their services. And a lot of our work is modeled out of other foundations that have taken the spotlight for several years, from projects like the Apache Software Foundation to the Mozilla Foundation, the Linux Foundation, right? These are all incredible nonprofits and corporations that allow for a transparent and decentralized open source community to upkeep the service. And so today we're on the mission to accelerate Filecoin and to create a more decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation to store humanity's information. I also wanted to share that we have a sibling organization, Filecoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web, that is a 501c3 nonprofit in the US. And this is really our long-term vision that in order for us to create a decentralized web, we must support the rest of the ecosystem. So we fund the development of open source tools that will be on the backbone of the decentralized web. And I'll cover a couple of this later on. And so you can see here, here are the major differences between our impact in these two arms of our organization. The first is really around ensuring that we can grow our developer ecosystem, support the community from our storage providers to clients that are storing data, to really supporting the incredible suite of companies and developers that have incredible tooling and research and development. And then from our nonprofit arm, we have given out grants to nonprofits, those that are really using the decentralized web and different tools in it to have human rights use cases, many of which I'll share later on. We do a lot of education around the decentralized web. We store a lot of public interest data sets. So we're about to pilot some storage of open data sets with some governments. And then we are also funding a lot of research and development for the long-term vision of what it means to really drive towards Web 3.0. I'm just going to cover this really quick. Many of you guys can see here, we have an incredible board at the foundation that includes the former Deputy CTO of the United States, Nicole Wong. It has Brian Battledorf, who helped start the Apache Foundation and then currently runs the Hyperledger project at the Linux Foundation. We have Marta, who's the board chair and is part of Protocol Labs, the company that helped create Filecoin in the very beginning. And then also Marcia Hoffman, who's a well-known electronic privacy attorney. And then we also have an incredible nonprofit board that includes folks from EFF and also the director of the Blockchain Association. So we're very, very plugged in on the policy side. We're also really blessed to have a number of advisors. I won't bore you guys here. You guys can see this, a lot of familiar faces. We have Joe Lubin, who co-founded Ethereum, Brewster Kahle, who founded the Internet Archive, many other incredible people here that help us support our work. And then we also have, this would all not be possible without an incredible team. So this week alone, we have grown to over 30 people. We also have a network of hundreds of people that support our ecosystem. And we also do very close collaboration with the Protocol Labs team. I don't have time to tell you about how extraordinary everyone is here, but to give you some perspective, my co-founder, Megan, she was the chief operating officer and co-founder of a company called 3Scan. She worked on that for a decade. She took the company from an idea to a valuation over $160 million. And through that experience, she really struggled with how do we host a lot of large data sets, especially in biotech as a use case, and do so in an affordable way that also where it will never have downtime, right? And we obviously offer an incredible solution to some of the challenges we see in Web 2.0 when there's centralized points of failure. We also have folks like Danny O'Brien, who was at the Electronic Frontier Foundation for over a decade. He's an internet activist, and he's currently a senior fellow with us. And we also have a few other incredible staff like Aaron Stanley, who came from CoinDesk and was running the major conference Consensus. So there's so many more people that I can't wait to share. We're also hiring. And so if you guys are interested in thinking about a career change or working in our space, we have a lot of jobs available and we hire anywhere in the world. So Sonia, who you see over here, she's our developer advocate based in Kenya. We pay a US salary anywhere in the world. And we really truly believe in a decentralized storage platform starts with a decentralized team that can really collaborate and work well together. And so if you guys are interested, definitely reach out. So I wanted to talk a little bit about spotlighting some of our projects, ones that I'm particularly proud of. The first one is Starling Lab. And so did someone want to say something? Or Sierra, were you about to say something? All right, well, I'll continue. So Starling Lab is a project that we funded earlier this year, and it launched out of Stanford's Department of Electrical Engineering and also the USC Shoah Foundation. So we are the main funder of this project. And what we're doing here is building open source tooling to allow for mobile capture of solutions for real-time capturing of human rights cases. We're creating a comprehensive training program to equip human rights organizations all around the world with turnkey solutions, decentralized storage, And there are so many stories around this, but you can imagine journalists, you can imagine folks that live in quite authoritarian governments. Sometimes the credibility of their information might be doubted by certain people. And so we're using blockchain technology as well as permanent storage to make sure that these kind of images are never altered. We're also pioneering legal standards and training, and also dealing with different accountability measures at the international and domestic level for custody. And so we're really thrilled to be able to fund projects like Starling Lab. One of my biggest, proudest parts of one thing that they've been able to achieve is archiving over 55,000 videos of testimonials of genocide survivors through the USC Shoah Foundation. This project really allows us to never forget that there was a time where hate was really built up around the world. And if these testimonials of these genocide survivors were to ever go down, we would be forgetting a really hard part of history where people were persecuted because of their ethnicity, their race, their religion, their beliefs. And so this is definitely one thing that we're very proud of. The second example I want to dive into is earlier this year, we also gave a $10 million US grant through Filecoin, so 50,000 Filecoin at the time, to Internet Archive. Many of you guys might be familiar. For those that are not, Internet Archive helps preserve incredible information online. They have an archive of every single website. So today, if you wanted to go back and look at your MySpace profile or old Yahoo pages, Internet Archive has had copies of that. And we're working right now to really bring all this incredible database of information from Internet Archive onto Web 3.0, on the decentralized web. And so we really do believe that the films, audios, books from the beginning of time on the internet is just as important as physical libraries that we see today and that we preserve today. And we're hoping to do that on the decentralized web. So I know that we only have limited time today, and I want to save the last 10 minutes for open questions. But next up, I will spend 10 minutes just covering what is Web3. So here I have a couple of screenshots of recent Twitter conversations, right? Web3 has been a buzz. Many Twitter threads are talking about it. Why someone like Alex went from a major Web3 skeptic to a Web3 proponent. There's been a number of people that have talked about Web3 in the light of DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, smart contracts. A lot of people are trying to learn and wrap their head around what it means. So I kind of touch upon us building the foundation of Web3 through decentralized web storage, but there is so much more that it enables that isn't just the use of blockchain technology. We're talking about new ways of collaboration, new ways of governance. And so Chris Dixon from Andreessen Horowitz is a great person to follow. He's written extensively about it, and Andreessen has been also very public about a lot of their stances for investments for Web3. And then also on the gaming side, we have folks like Brian, who was the co-founder of the company Patreon that helps creators. He talks about Web3 use cases in the gaming space, right? Where we've probably seen a lot of decentralization happen when players interact in Web 2.0 and in gaming environments where they're exchanging goods, they're exchanging services, they're creating new types of communities. So a lot of the trends in Web3 are not brand new. They have existed in other spaces for a while. And people are really realizing that this economic token of exchange and this ability of communication is so much further enabled through Web3 and blockchain technology. So for those that need a little bit more detail, I wanted to cover just the evolution of the web. So Web 1.0, we remember the time where there was only desktop accessible websites. The example that I like to give is if you remember MapQuest, you would use MapQuest to look up directions somewhere. And then every time you move the pointer on your screen to go to another part of MapQuest, the page would reload itself, right? So there was, aspects of the web that we see today. There was dedicated infrastructure, but there wasn't actually responsiveness that Web 2.0, where we're currently at, offered. So with Web 2.0, we started to see the rise of social networks. We started to see companies like Uber, which wouldn't exist actually today without the rise of mobile applications, right? Uber would work terribly if it was just desktop based. And today we can use Uber and other ride calling services to get from A to B. And Web 2.0, if you imagine Google Maps today, is really dynamic, right? You can move the pointer on Google Maps and it doesn't reload the page every time. It's very versatile for you to load and see the aspect of what cloud-driven computing really means. Now with Web 3.0, you can see the kind of companies that have given rise to it, starting with the use of Bitcoin, a number of other companies that are more utility-based. So places like Ethereum for smart contracts, they've really allowed for actual services to be built on this notion of a decentralized web. And so we're building data architecture. We also see new forms of edge computing infrastructure that are coming about. And so not only are we seeing more growth, but we're also seeing a lot of dollars spent in new ways of actually companies raising money, right? So a lot of companies since 2017 have gone through what's called initial coin offerings. Rather than going through traditional venture, they've raised capital from other techniques. We're trying to see a number of organizations raise money through decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, which some of you guys might be familiar with. And so you can see here, this is another way of looking at it, the different kinds of companies that have come up that are thinking about their services in a decentralized way, where there is no centralized form of ownership. And we're seeing this across all industries, all different kind of application types, more and more companies becoming decentralized. Not every single one of these companies here are exactly Web 3.0, but we're already starting to see the movement of more and more people wanting better security, more anonymous messaging services, and also better security on top of that. And so this is also another way to look at Web 3.0, a modular framework. And so you can see a number of ways that this ecosystem interacts. And so with the last 5 minutes, I did want to cover some policies trends that we're starting to see in Web3 and in the blockchain space. Andrew already stole my thunder and spoke a lot about these recent trends, but I'm happy to reiterate. So you can see here, I just took some graphics, but there's very different regulatory sentiment with currencies all around the world. There's places where they're really against cryptocurrency. Places like China and India, we saw just a few weeks ago, China doing a very strict crackdown on Bitcoin mining, and not just Bitcoin, but a number of projects were impacted because when folks started to mine Bitcoin, a lot of people in China also started to mine and create the infrastructure for other crypto projects. And so this was already coming for a long time, but even our storage providers based in China, they are all already decentralizing and moving to other locations. And so there's actually a lot of miners that have moved to the US, to North America, to other parts of Asia. I personally think this is a huge opportunity for Taiwan, being Taiwanese myself. And so I definitely think there's a lot that's positive there from this crackdown, where we truly see better decentralization, especially when it comes to the mining side. Other kinds of regulatory trends, some of you guys might be curious. I know this was a question that someone had shared earlier. Is what exactly is a crypto foundation like the Filecoin Foundation? How do you even set something up? So even in our process for incorporation, there's certain countries where it's easier for governments to understand what exactly a foundation does, right? And so most projects start quite centralized. It comes from a company, and usually a foundation is almost like the mini government for the economy of that currency or that project. And so countries like Switzerland, countries like Singapore, they're really friendly towards the setup of foundations and the setup of most cryptocurrency. So you'll see a lot of currency projects being based there, and everything that we see is green. And that definitely does have a lot to do with regulation. A lot of projects want to be in a place where they don't have to deal with too much regulation. As we know, the policy space is probably always 5 to 10 years behind where market trends are. And so there's a lot of projects that have chosen to move to these greener or more positive locations. hopefully Taiwan can be on the positive green side too, or be very crypto friendly. I think a lot of regulators in Taiwan are still wrapping their head around what exactly blockchain versus DeFi versus everything else is. I did also want to share that there's a number of efforts that we're doing today just to educate policymakers on what Web3 is, because a lot of folks building on Web3, we're building infrastructure, we're building tools, we're building better open source technology that is slightly different than what most people think of as purely DeFi. So there are cryptocurrencies today that truly are just trading currencies. And there's a set of other currencies that you're using that token in order to use a service, right? So for our case, you need Filecoin in order to do decentralized file storage. And so it's much more of a utility case of using crypto. We're not necessarily trying to pump, dump, or impact any markets. There are certain projects which have been under really intense scrutiny by regulators because they weren't necessarily the best actors in their transparency and the way that they were trying to deal with prices. And so this continues to be a challenge, I think, for a lot of projects in the Web3 space, is really how to translate what Web3 is, what a decentralized internet means, how we can also make sure that innovation is not limited, right? I think for many of my friends who are developers working at major companies that are now developing on the blockchain in their own projects or working for large companies in Web3, they've all said to me they've never seen faster software development in their life and more innovative ways of doing things. And every single week, there is probably a handful of things that move so much quicker. I think we've also seen that with the open source movement, right? Open source code has also led to better software development and better products at the end of the day for all of our users. And so we're seeing this just tenfold at much faster speeds with the rise of Web3. And so my hope is that regulators don't end up stifling innovation by some of their more conservative one-off use cases where every technology, everything that we touch, there will be bad actors that tend to manipulate or use it, but not to let that kind of mental thinking and conservative thinking limit the potential of innovation that helped create places like the internet for the first place. If early people believed that the internet was only going to be used for porn, and sex pictures, we would not have all these services that really allow us to be able to communicate and thrive during COVID, right? The world would shut down if these types of services didn't exist. And people decided to shut down the internet. And so that is my hope on the regulatory front. And I know I am close to time here. I want to save 10 minutes. So I'll turn the floor back to you, Jane, for questions from the audience. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Hey, thank you for your sharing. For all the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box on the bottom right hand side, and then you can type your question there. And from me, actually, I have one question for you, Clara. So,
Yes.
yeah, the question I have is, a little bird told me that you were in Taiwan earlier this year during the lockdown, and I'm happy to hear that you say Taiwan has a lot of opportunities in blockchain ecosystem. And I'm just curious about what's your perspective about the high-tech industry and the Taiwan government right now. What's their roles they should play to foster a more vibrant community? How should they do so that we can keep having more opportunities in this ecosystem?
Yes, I have a lot of ideas for Taiwan. I think Taiwan was a really amazing time for a number of people that are expats that all returned. I think I was part of that cohort where I don't think I've spent that much time in Taiwan in a very long time. I was there for 3 months earlier this year. I think Taiwan has a couple of opportunities. I think some of the limitations to Taiwan's growth is that, unfortunately, this is not just Taiwan, this is rest of Asia. Everyone needs a certification of some type to feel like they need to get into that field. And I think that limits innovation and limits thinking, right? I went to the bank and I was told by the VP of this bank that everyone working at the front desk there had 10 different certifications that they're really proud to show off. And, I think that's really, really great to show mastery in a topic. However, I do think that almost limits the way people feel like they can take their own risks to explore careers that are emerging, like blockchain, that don't necessarily have very black and white certification, that require people to just try it out, learn, and then see where things go. And I think Andrew already touched upon this, but the blockchain community is so inclusive. If you reach out, people will respond. People are incredibly supportive of each other. Everyone's learning. Things are moving really quickly. And so my hope is that we can bring a new era of engineers and talent in the blockchain space out of Taiwan. I think there's a lot of potential there. And every single blockchain project right now, I will guarantee, is struggling with talented developers. That's really how this ecosystem is surviving today. There's not a lot of opportunity yet for a lot of these roles to be just consumer facing, but the technical talent definitely is reaching a bottleneck where the best talent is so hard to find. Even us at the foundation, we are hiring a ton of developers right now, and it takes us a very long time to find the right people with the right talent. There are a lot of new grads from universities all around the world that are really talented because they're able to just spend their entire careers. Their first year in the blockchain space is like 5 years in any other industry, because most people, most of these kinds of technologies, innovation didn't exist before. And so I have one wish, which is that if Taiwan can really ramp up on talent and driving a talent pipeline that allows for innovation of all types in the blockchain space. We have to start from the education level, and we have to start with a method that works with Taiwan culture, right? And so it might be like Blockchain Academy with certification, with support from a number of projects like ourselves and others that are looking for talent, and making sure that we can continue to feed really great engineers coming out of Taiwan to be truly a leader in the blockchain space. I think Taiwan has a lot of potential. It has incredibly hardworking and talented people. I think we just need to make the bridge to make sure everyone can quickly ramp up on everything else that is happening in the blockchain space that China is very ahead of the rest of the world in. So.
Yeah, speaking of talents, I'm also quite curious about, do you have any advice for young people who want to join this industry? Any do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I would say for young people that want to join, just do it, right? It's I think a lot of people, it's just even like buying an NFT or setting up your crypto wallet. I recently taught my dad how to set up a wallet, and you just don't know how hard it is. It might seem intimidating because there's all these very complicated resources that are available for you to learn. And even if you can't keep up or can't figure it out, there is a huge community of people that are willing to answer your questions. There's no stupid questions in the blockchain space. There's so many areas that's evolving, right? On the DeFi side, there's financial terms that even I don't know. And then on the Web3 side, there's companies growing left and right that didn't exist a few months ago that now have millions of dollars in funding. And so I think the best way for young people interested to get started is to just get involved. At the foundation, we support, I think, close to 6 to 12 hackathons a month. So there's so many opportunities to learn, to get started, to get involved. We also have a ton of resources that can help people understand our ecosystem, but every project is like that. They have a ton of resources trying to get people involved, and there's a lot of people willing to also support along the way to build your first app, right? Whether that's something silly or something pretty serious. We have a tool called nft.storage that makes it really easy for you to put your NFT on the decentralized web, and also tutorials on even how to create an NFT. So all of these are available out there. It's just, it looks really hard when you don't even get started to try. And there is actually even, there's no age limit to say, you have to be young or passionate about learning to necessarily get involved. I think people from all areas of careers can get involved. There's a founder of a really well-known company, I can't announce it, that's about to join our team, who has zero blockchain experience, but a lot on the technical side. And so everyone is learning. And everyone can get involved. There's always an open seat at the door. And if it's not officially joining a project, it could be contributing to an existing one. It could be participating in a hackathon. It could be applying for grants. So we give out tons of grants, from micro grants of 5K all the way to developer grants that might be 50 to 100K, just for people to build tools to get started. And we do this at very high volumes, from 30 to 40 to 60 every quarter. And so we can, if you have an idea, you can also apply for our grants and get funding and really have the resourcing to get started.
Awesome. We have some questions from the audience. First is, so how can decentralized web deal with privacy issue?
Yeah, I think when things are more decentralized, it's definitely, I mean, imagine today on Facebook finding other people, it's a lot easier, but when we have direct and more secure messaging apps, it's really hard to spam and reach people at scale, as much as centralized services have that opportunity to, send a lot of advertisements to mine user data. So I think it's a trade-off, right? Even in Web 2.0, there's a trade-off between how much you moderate the good and the trade-off between how much privacy you want. I don't think it's any different in Web 3.0. I think some of the challenges is thinking about this in a framework of when application centralized services are more decentralized, there's no central point. And so you definitely have way more privacy than Web 2.0 in my argument for, if we look across the board at a number of services. I think things do get challenging when it comes to thornier content and how that might be taken down, right? And so for us, we are building a number of tools to make sure that there's, the bad content don't necessarily persist on our platform. And I think a number of other projects are thinking the same. I think it's unfortunate that there's also a lot of scammy bots and things in crypto, and so those are easy to spot. But I would say if you're just getting started in the blockchain space, definitely be also very careful about these scams that do happen, where people might try to, give you free tokens or want your information in order to sell you your project. And this happens mainly on the DeFi side rather than in the Web3 world.
Got it. Thank you so much for your sharing. We had another question from the audience, and also considering the time, it may be our last question. The question is about metaverse. So future metaverse will probably separate it into centralized metaverse, like Meta, and decentralized metaverse, like Decentraland. How important you think Filecoin IPFS network will play as a role to support the infinite size of decentralized metaverse?
Yeah, we absolutely, like I said, we're building the storage layer that everything else sits on, which includes the metaverse, right? So we have a company called Mona.Forum that just graduated from one of our accelerators, and they are a metaverse company. And so their entire storage and everyone that builds on top of their platform is stored on IPFS and Filecoin. So, I think the metaverse is definitely really, really interesting. We're seeing so many companies really expand on this. And I do want to define metaverse in two buckets. There's metaverse that has existed for a while in the gaming and VR space that may or may not be related to blockchain technology. And then there's the use of metaverse in Web3 or crypto communities. And sometimes that might mean, there are actual exchange of NFTs or goods that happen in a gaming environment, or in the case of places like Decentraland, right? You can buy physical objects. That transaction is facilitated by cryptocurrencies, right, or some layer of that. And so, like I said, I don't think the metaverse is any different from anything that we've seen in the past. Roblox, even Minecraft, right? There's so many games where you build your own universe, you have fun. I think that the difference is there's definitely much more of an economic incentive that's created with currencies and cryptocurrencies, especially, and also the price of physical objects that we've never seen to some scale, but we definitely want to play a leading role. Right now, 7 million NFTs are all stored on Filecoin today. And so if you've ever used OpenSea, we definitely power a number of places where you can exchange or buy NFTs. And so we are basically, we can store anything on Filecoin, and we definitely are there for other kinds of trends like the metaverse.
Thank you so much for your sharing, Clara. Now it's time for our panel discussion. Let me welcome the panel, our moderator for our panel discussion. So in our next session, we'll have YJ Chen to be our session moderator. YJ is currently an engineering manager at Reddit. Welcome, YJ. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Jane, for that introduction. And thank you, Clara, for that lovely, very inspiring talk. As Jane mentioned, I've been working in software engineering for the past decade. I've been really intrigued and curious about blockchain and crypto during this time. And so I'm really excited to hear from our three panelists on blockchain today. First, we have Clara Tao, the speaker you just heard from, founder of Filecoin Foundation. Then second, we have, oh, excuse me, let me adjust my slide. Second, we have Sarah Wei, CEO at Aegis Custody, a startup providing custody solutions for crypto institutional investors and asset management. And last, we have Sophia Zhao, principal at AVG Blockchain Fund, who has been working with cryptocurrency projects since 2017. It's so great to see the three of you accomplished women in tech here. Welcome. So to start us off, I would like to get a brief round of introductions from all of you. How does your current work relate to blockchain technology and how you got into this industry? So Sophia, could you start us off?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm a principal at Alumni Ventures Blockchain Fund. We are a US-based crypto fund that leverages our community of over 600,000 members to add value and provide support to our portcos. We were early investors in BlockFi, Algorand, and Mythical Games, and we've been co-investing alongside Pantera, A16Z, Animoca, Alameda, and Dapper Labs, just to name a few. Before I get into how I got into crypto, my background was in startups. I work with CXOs and tech founders on their corp dev, biz dev strategies and execution in a cross-border context. And I learned about blockchain when I was studying at Yale School of Management in 2017. As part of a coursework, we were helping a VC identifying investment opportunities in the States, and we look at several different verticals, including AR, MIAL, metaverse. There was a bunch of things that we looked at, and my teammates assigned me to cover blockchain. And I was like, what the heck is this? But the more I read, the more I fell into the rabbit hole and bought my first Bitcoin in 2017, around $3,000, and sold close to the all-time high later that year. That really helped pay back some of my student debt. Since then, I started my crypto journey. My first job was with Galaxy Digital on the advisory team, working with a portfolio of startup clients on their ICO initiatives in the bleak winter of 2018. If you're around, you remember how challenging it was for both the startups as well as for the investors. Then I spent a year each at Huobi US Exchange in San Francisco and Crypto.com in the Americas, Europe, and a little bit of the TAM region. And currently, I'm a very active volunteer judge and mentor at different protocols, hackathons, and accelerators. For example, Solana, ETH Global, Algorand, and I'm currently a Harmony's incubator DAO governor. I really enjoy being plugged in at the forefront to know who's building what is trending, and potentially pollinate opportunities, whether it's talent or investment. Pleased to meet you all.
Thank you, Sophia. Looking forward to hearing more from you. Sarah, would you mind going next?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm the founder and CEO of Aegis Custody. So as YJ has mentioned, so we are a binational digital asset custodian and trust companies both in the US and Asia. So I kind of started in the crypto space, not as an entrepreneur, but more on the investor side. So I similarly to the same time frame like Sophia, got into crypto in 2017. Also buying Bitcoin and then as an investor for investing in ICO, and then got really excited about the concept. So I went into the asset management side in San Francisco to kind of help launch like the first batch of crypto fund of funds. So that's like asset allocations to more of the digital asset and blockchain companies. And then was fortunate enough to be in one of the asset managers that are regulated by SEC, which really got themselves into a big problem for custodying assets, because for institutional investors where they have a lot of limited partners, investors, LPs to report to, they are required to have a separation of investment strategies, investment managers, as well as having somebody to safekeeping their assets due to a lot of the compliant and regulatory reasons. And it was really hard at the time when there was really no infrastructure. And that's how I kind of got into the space and trying to like also solve the problem, not just on the technology part, but also on the financial services part, the infrastructure, as well as the regulatory. And I think given the recent regulatory changes, especially around how the China government has gone into the place, also kind of like putting a lot of restrictions on companies building or in the crypto and trading space. We kind of really have got like a build out this infrastructure to really kind of like allowing the East and the West with a compliant and regulatory framework. So that's kind of like how my journey got into the crypto space. But actually, before the crypto side of me, I was actually more from the traditional finance side. So started my career at Goldman Sachs back in Asia, and then went to get my MBA at Stanford. So kind of really see blockchain revolutionize the traditional finance. Like there are similarities, but there's so many other innovations that we constantly challenging ourselves. So really happy to be on the panel to share more, especially having dialogue with Sophia and Clara.
Great. That's a fascinating background. Would love to hear more from you in a bit. And Clara, final, would you like to add to what we already know about you?
Yeah, I'm happy to just share a little bit about how I got involved in blockchain and cryptocurrency. I think previously my background was already shared, but I first got into blockchain and cryptocurrency back in 2012, 2013. And a friend of mine was in YC with one of the co-founders of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong at the time, and he would talk his ear off to me around everything related to Bitcoin, blockchain, everything else. I was also, I love to volunteer in my free time, and I was running a homeless clinic in Los Angeles. And I remember at the time thinking, what if I could teach everyone how to mine Bitcoin back in the day? Could have maybe solved homelessness in Los Angeles if that were actually true. But for me, I first got into the policy side. I was at Google as a technology policy fellow back in 2013. I was actually one of the first people, if not the first, to talk to members of Congress around explaining what blockchain even was and bringing experts to the table to really have one of the earliest discussions. I think at the time, the topic was very much over the heads of most regulators. And it wasn't necessarily a space that had so much momentum and steam that they cared as much about. I spent the last decade or so really focused on solving problems in Web 2.0. So I think others have mentioned, I spent a lot of time looking at how content on the web can be weaponized for bad. We saw this with the 2016 US presidential elections, where there were a lot of Russian bots and trolls. And so I spent a lot of time as a CTO of two teams in the US government, one based at Department of Homeland Security, looking at foreign influence operations, so how people weaponize behavior on online platforms to achieve a particular objective. Some might be as critical as disrupting an election from happening. And then the other I looked at was really homegrown extremism. And so how extremists and very polarizing groups are weaponizing the web and the way that humans behave on the web today to again achieve a particular outcome. Around 2 years ago, I started the first professional association in the field of trust and safety, which is a growing class of professionals. It's been around for a long time, but it's a subset of professionals that determine what is acceptable content and behavior online. So most platforms today have content policies that determine what gets taken down, what gets uploaded, but this has been around since the early days of marketplaces like eBay, right? And so for me, a lot of my time spent in solving a lot of really tough issues in Web 2.0 really came down to the one thing that Web 3.0 is solving, which is that incentive model layer. Today, we can try to pressure companies to do more to fix what is broken on the web. And I was, a fellow at Mozilla working with some of the smartest activists to really bring some of these details to light. But they're all Band-Aid solutions if we can't fix the economic incentives of why. And that's actually what a lot of what we see as innovation in blockchain today is trying to solve, is fixing that incentive layer. So for me, coming back into the blockchain space was a natural fit, where, as we saw the community and ecosystem really move forward, Filecoin was a project that I felt particularly close to, and there's actually a lot of people from Mozilla, a lot of people who have fought for the human rights and voices of a lot of people previously marginalized online, to make sure that in Web 3.0 we can really do this right, and we can also do it by solving some of the incentive problems. So that's what brought me here.
Yeah, it's a big problem to solve, hard problem to solve. So to structure our discussion, I have some questions for each of you, but feel free to also, respond to each other, or if you want to weigh in on a question, feel free to jump in. But to start us off, Sophia, since you are managing a blockchain fund, I was wondering if you could share some perspective around the climate around blockchain investments, some of the recent innovations and trends, since there's been so much buzz and so much excitement around this space.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to share what I've seen across my desk and my experiences investing in this space so far. So I would say if 2021 is a movie, the title should be Fast and Furious on steroids. As of the end of Q3 this year, the year-to-date global blockchain VC funding is approximately $15 billion. Whereas last year, the total VC funding was about $3 billion. So quite the significant jump this year. And overall, US is like the most active and the largest region for investment activities, followed by Asia and then Europe. And of course, I'm continuing to see news of new investment funds being raised to deploy capital into the ecosystem. So overall, I would say there's a ton of interest, activities, capital across the entire blockchain ecosystem. And it's really driven by, one, institutional players' continued adoption. Two, retail customers being inspired, encouraged, and curious to try things out, as well as there's a lot of innovation from blockchain companies trying to build something new. So I've never seen so many unicorn minted this year, where companies have raised mega rounds with valuation of over $1 billion. So for example, FTX, which is a Hong Kong-based cryptocurrency exchange backed by the creme de la creme of the investment universe, is currently valued at $18 billion. or Fireblocks. It's a digital asset custody provider based in New York. They've raised over 300 million this year and is valued at $2 billion. So lots of activities. And in the past months, I can't recall how many times I have conversation with founders where they want to close their rounds in 2 weeks, or they're oversubscribed, or the round is done by the time I even got to the intro call. So it's been super fast, super busy, and I think it's a great time to be an entrepreneur because you get to access so much resource to help you build your vision. So in terms of trends, I guess in general, I'll keep it very high level. In the non-fungible token or NFT space, well, first of all, I assume not everyone know what NFT is. So very quickly, NFT basically is non-fungible token, which transforms digital works of art and other collectibles into one-of-a-kind, verifiable asset that are easy to trade on the blockchain. So this year, it's definitely the year of the NFT, whereas last year it was the DeFi year. And a personal anecdote is that I bought my first NFT this year when Snoop Dogg launched his exclusive NFT drop with Crypto.com, the company that I was at. I was so excited. Weeks ahead of the drop, I played Snoop Dogg's album all week long, and my husband was very concerned since I was such a jazz person. But anyway, since early this year, we've definitely seen a lot more artists exploring and releasing their own NFTs to creatively engage with their communities, to creatively inspire new followers. And the proof is in the numbers. So for example, in the third week of August this year, the global NFT sale was just over $1 billion. Since then, it has tapered off a little bit, and it's hovering between 200 million to 250 million a week. So I think in terms of trends, what I've seen is that NFTs are becoming a status, which then becomes a passport that unlocks access to certain elite groups or clubs, which further unlocks special privileges of, I think, 10,000 unique Bored Ape NFTs, which are digital collectibles living on the Ethereum blockchain. So if you are one of the very privileged owner of this NFT, you get to access a Discord group that is exclusive for owners, including the likes of NBA star Stephen Curry. And then you get access to owner-only merchandise drops, you get invited to special events. So it's very interesting how the evolution of an NFT, where you can simply mint a JPEG into an NFT and it sits there in your wallet, like the Snoop Dogg NFT that I have, it's still sitting in my wallet. Whereas now we're seeing NFTs usability and value being creatively explored so that there's more utility to your NFT ownership. One of the deals that we recently closed, it's building a NFT / metaverse / monopoly type of game where if you have an NFT in that metaverse, you can collect a few, which converges into an upgraded NFT, which then when you use that NFT to attend a sports game, you get special, exclusive or that game specific NFT drops. So there's a ton more interesting things we can certainly experiment with NFTs, and I'm really, really excited to see what's coming next. And of course, as for myself, I am not that rich, but it doesn't prevent me from desiring to owning one of these CryptoPunks or Bored Apes. So another trend I've seen is the fractionalization of the ownership of NFTs. And this is also achieved by the next topic, which is DAO. So DAOs, in essence, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's basically an organization that exists as like a set of smart contract rules enforced on the Ethereum blockchain. And very simply, all of us today here at the seminar, if we want, we can form our own DAO. And we can form a DAO around a thesis, for example. to own the next up-and-coming NFT. So we vote in the governors, we figure out how are we going to manage a treasury, we figure out how are we going to facilitate the NFT purchase. It's all community sourced, managed, we vote in the mandates, we set how we want to run the DAO. Then we go ahead and start buying these NFTs, and it can be pretty funny in a way where if we bought the statue of David, we can, as a rule within our DAO, we can say each member can have a part of the statue of David for one day, and we can rotate our ownership around it. Or if we own a NFT that is basically a JPEG, we can pixelize the ownership. We can say, okay, well, today, or member A, I can own 1% of the total pixel within this artwork. So it's a very creative way to explore what a community can do to manage the goal of the DAO organization. I'll take a pause from sharing of what I've seen so far. I'm sure there'll be questions in the Q&A period, and I'll pass the mic over to my fellow panelists for now.
Any of you care to comment on what Sophia just touched on? If not, I do have a question for Sarah. One of the trends I think we've seen recently is an enthusiasm from like institutions to adopt this technology and to also like hold some of these assets. So I'm really curious how that works. And so since Sarah, you've like worked in both traditional finance and blockchain, how do institutional investors evaluate or trust, or like different entities trust your custody solutions? How do they look at that?
Yeah, so actually, I really echo what Sophia was saying. I mean, my personal interest, I also wanted to build out like a, say, like an NFT gallery. It's just like, it's just so much fun to do that. And then I think also on the NFT part, just when the dollar amount like continue to surge, there's also growing interest to find NFT custodian. Like just alone this week, we were approached by 3 different parties, from NFT marketplaces, from blockchain foundations, like from like digital art galleries, because there were just so much more interest that turning into NFTs, and they wanted to be able to have like a regulated entity to provide infrastructure as well as to provide security and custody. So I think the trend is, I think also NFT is moving into the mainstream. So more institutions are also coming in, and that's also driven by regulation. So we see companies in the NFT space that are also starting to get into the public, like a more of the public arena in terms of like capital market, and that also driven from has driven them to actually have more infrastructure player as a custodian. So back to what YJ is asking about needs for custodian. I mean, essentially it's pretty natural evolution when the amount of the tokens or value increases to a certain point of time. People do care about losing their tokens, losing their money because it's become so valuable. And so to the sense that institutions normally carry a larger sum of money, so it become natural for them, also driven by regulation needs, to find a regulated party that will actually take some workload from their side, so that on one hand, they made their decision to hold certain coins, and then they outsourcing the safekeeping part of the assets to the custodian. But actually, for Aegis custody, where I founded, we actually embrace decentralization finance as well, which means that we also use smart contracts to replace intermediaries in the transaction. So The DeFi concept is in contrast to CeFi, like centralized finance, where it's dominated for centuries in the financial ecosystem, where the transactions are done through intermediaries like banks, asset management firms, investment brokerage. And right now, I think the beauty of blockchain or the beauty of blockchain-based finance or decentralized finance is to use smart contracts that are not human related, that are based on blockchain to essentially replace the transactions. An example like what we have, we're doing, I mean, include like asset management. So previously, right now, you have big asset management firms for people to give them money, and then you have like investment managers to pick their strategy and then deploy capital. But right now, I mean, for many DeFi protocols or asset management firms, like for example, like we also offer like EO aggregator. Essentially, is a smart contract based mutual fund or like an aggregator, so that is also on smart contract. And not only for that, I mean, as a trust company or as custodian, like smart contracts also allow more transparent and trusted way for monitoring your assets, because you can actually, with our institutional clients, with us, to jointly like control and monitor your assets through private keys, and that's also done through smart contracts. And on top of that, there's many financial services that include like administration type of services, for example, like fund administration. So previously, you have asset management firms, you have fund administrators, and things are done like manually or in paper. But now, given all the decentralized financial services are built on top of blockchain and smart contracts, we build smart contracts to ultimately calculate the common term called net asset value, like NAVs, like to directly calculate it, automatically calculated the net asset value changes for an asset management firm or for a fund, and that's on smart contract. So when a deposit or withdrawal is made, there's a changes of an NAV, and previously that was calculated in paper or like in cell. Right now it's done through smart contracts. So a lot of the decentralized financial services or financial services are actually replaced by smart contract. So even for us as a regulated financial institutions, we're not really kind of sitting in the middle. We're actually empowering this ecosystem or empowering more of the blockchain-based financial activities to still be accessible and by institutional investor, which they still have to meet certain regulatory needs. So I think that real kind of really resonates to a lot of the prior panelists, I mean, innovations, is that as the industry, for example, the financial industry is evolving, so there are innovations, and as like an infrastructure player, like a custodian, we also have to kind of evolve with the industry. So, and then to provide and build up tools and also services that are more fitting into the custodian, the blockchain based thing. And I know I kind of saw the message from Clara talk about like staking, which if you love to share more, like I could echo more as well, because it's also part of the services that we can provide to the clients, and that's also echoing to the community, where essentially giving a lot of the autonomy back to token holders. But I think that's generally how I see the industry is evolving, and also how we as part of the ecosystem player kind of also play our role here.
That is so fascinating that you know, you're sort of like squaring the regulatory needs with something very decentralized. I've always been very confused about how that's supposed to happen, but I'm really excited to see this innovation. So one of the things that I think I'm very fascinated by is this whole concept of decentralization and why it could help bring about like better things for all of us, not just in finance, but maybe in like some of the societal problems we need to solve. Claire, I know you have some thoughts around this. So tell us, like, why is Web 3.0 going to solve all our problems?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something depressing and something positive. The depressing reality is a lot of early, Web3 blockchain technology do come from more technical communities. And as we know, a lot of technical communities are coming from more male-dominated fields. And so, as it's hard to measure statistics in the blockchain space, but to put it in perspective, today only 15% of Bitcoin traders are women. If you imagine the amount of wealth that has been generated from the cryptocurrency space, whether that's through trading, whether that's through building companies, the gap between pay between women and men are just increasing if we don't solve this gender and diversity problem. So I think there's a lot of potential for blockchain technology to give financing, to give opportunity to people all around the world, to increase liquidity of different assets, as the other panelists have shared. But it's so important that we also think about representation at the table. I have been at so many crypto and blockchain conferences through the years. There's a lot of cultural communities where people have, a giant party at a nightclub where there are women in very limited clothing that are dancing around a table full of men. And sometimes these are not necessarily the most welcoming places. When you are leading a blockchain foundation or when you're leading a blockchain project, for women to feel like they're included and they can show up. My foundation, we are, all of our executives are majority women. We have a majority women only board. And, every time someone interacts with us, they say it's just so refreshing that this exists, because it is very rare to see a lot of projects and people like Sarah and Sophia be in places like panels. There are so many blockchain conferences and events where I'm the only female speaker, or it's always male dominated. And then beyond that, in addition to just the gender ratio, blockchain is really fun and really exciting and really fast moving, but it's also really inaccessible to people without the capital to spend. So as one illustrative example, I was at a conference called Mainnet earlier this year in New York City. And I looked around me, and it was probably 5 or 10% of the room were females. But beyond that, the ticket price to attend, if you were not a speaker, was $2,500. And so I had a friend who was a senior software engineer at Google, really talented person, who was like, how do I even afford, if I just want to learn about the space, justifying paying $2,500 to learn it, to learn about how to get involved, right? And so a few of myself and a few other folks in the blockchain community, we're trying to figure out how to improve access by thinking about, free tickets for minorities, women, and students to be able to even show up and carry weight at the door. And so, I've personally funded tickets for minorities and women to attend some of these events. I try to include as many females and minorities whenever there's a crypto party, a blockchain party, just really getting people who wouldn't otherwise think they belong to belong. And this is also, people of color. There's just so many different gaps today that we have to think about. I think the positive spin to it is a lot of the crypto and blockchain community today, people can remain anonymous. You'll notice this on Twitter. A lot of people use avatars. And so sometimes you get less of the discrimination that you typically see in an offline world. When people do decide to go by a pseudonym, they decide to go by an avatar, they are not judged by necessarily who they are, their backgrounds, but by the quality of their work. And that's been incredibly impressive to see in especially the development side of Web3, just such incredible talent that normally in traditional companies probably wouldn't even make it to the interview round or make it past. People who have been seen as outsiders that are normally discriminated, them being able to really show their work at the table just through really good code, really good projects, really good ideas. So I wanted to wrap up with that note, but I definitely want to hear from other panelists their experiences as well.
Well, I think I've been really blessed in the way that I found myself constantly surrounded with women in crypto, and I feel very happy working with women professionals. For example, right now, I'm part of the incubator DAO governors of 9 people, and of the 9, 8 are women. And we're constantly thinking about, okay, well, given this DAO structure where we wanted to encourage innovation, we want to incubate ideas, how do we go about selecting partners, whether it's investors or mentors or resources that are conscious with inclusion and diversity. So I think there's a lot more thoughts being parted to this topic, and I think that is a really good thing to have. I think personally, when I go to conferences, I definitely don't really enjoy the after parties because it mostly involves drinking with your crypto bros at a bar and whatnot. To me, how I've been doing it is more of just making sure I connect with people on the conferences, and if I see like women professional at these events, I'm happy to introduce them to other women professionals. So we create this group that we really help each other out. So I think the difference and how we can make a difference starts with each and every one of us. I think being on this panel is my privilege to be meeting all these amazing women professionals in crypto, and I think as we continue to pollinate ideas and continue to network, just continue keeping in mind that we're here to support one another. I think it's my key takeaway and what I try to do and live by.
Well, and yeah, completely echoing what Sophia is saying. Actually, we met at the incubator DAO, and then we had opportunity to sit on the panel. And then also she was very kind just to introducing someone she knows from like a staking company. And then we're meeting up in London next week. So I think things for that kind of initiatives will turn out to have like positive effects. But I do wanted to share for the blockchain community, I think Clara touched upon like incentives. So I think it's huge differences of how blockchain communities thrive, because if you think about the concept of ICOs, the concept of IEOs, or the concept of token issuance, essentially, yes, like you have random people printing out money, but as an incentive where you have a new group of people, they wanted to form different communities, and in these communities, they would share some sort of ideas, but they are also incentivized to get reward because the token price will increase. So that's why like it seems like the growth of the blockchain has increased a lot because there is so much incentive and involved with tokens, as well as like new mechanism. For example, like what Claire was talking about, the decentralized DAO, where essentially people are involved to create new rules for the community, and then for whoever wanted to be part of the community would get reward, and it's an incentive. It's actually a very positive reinforcement of leapfrogging the society as well as creating new communities. So I think as I think about like the topic, because other panelists were talking about like the gender differences, I was really think that well, I think for a lot of the women, I think it's very new for many of them to embrace something new, because a lot of the times maybe I think it's not natural to think about, oh, I got this opportunity to first of all create something new. By, for example, issuing the token and then create a mechanism to ask others to follow me by incentivize them through tokens, as well as creating more mechanisms in terms of how I wanted to operate in terms of these communities by also incentivized with them with like tokens and reward. So I think this is just like a different way of how like society and sociology are involved. I'm not an expert of that, but it's a different way to get involved with the newer economy as well as a different type of community. So I would say that perhaps like maybe through panels like this or like conferences like this, we get more of the words out to a more general public so that, oh, they get understanding of actually there are so many new things that are involved here. And if they are willing to kind of give a try, or just take the chances, then they can be also part of some community, or even like they can create their own community. So it's more like positive reinforcement as well as more innovations.
I think hearing from three of you, I think the future is bright. I know we are over, and it's such a joy to see these talented female leaders here with us today. So I know we are over our time. So I am going to I think hand the floor. Thank you all for being here today and for having this discussion with us. And I'm going to hand the mic back over to Jane, our event moderator, and thank everyone for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, YJ. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Sarah and Sophia. All right, we are now at the end of our session today. Thank everyone for joining our forum today. So before we end, you see my screen right now? Yes, remember to help us to fill in the post-event survey. If you fill in the survey, you'll get a chance to win a book from the 3 awesome female authors. Yeah, and if you like this event, don't forget to follow us, follow Natia on Facebook and LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us and hope to see you again.